Hello and welcome to the Business of Betting podcast. Today I'm joined by Logan Fields, the author of 2020 Sports Betting. Logan, thanks for coming on the podcast. The Business of Betting podcast is proudly brought to you by the Betfair Hub from Betfair Australia. No matter where you are in the world, if you want expert articles from pro punters, from building automated models to betting psychology, check out the Betfair Hub. betfair.com.au/hub. Gamble responsibly. Today I'm joined by Logan Fields, the author of 2020 Sports Betting. Logan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, pleasure to be here, Jake. Thanks for having me.
It's a difficult task for many people to write a book, especially about betting. I know many people that have tried or have got one or two chapters locked away and they're still working on it. But what was the impetus to write a book, especially with someone with your background, which I want you to describe in detail as well, so we can get a sense of where you've come from and how the book came to be.
Okay. I grew up on the East Coast in Maryland, and had a normal upbringing. Gambling wise, I would say I was a NFL $50 a game player on weekends, and maybe some blackjack a couple times a year up to Atlantic City. So there was just a normal, regular guy. And by the time I was 34, there was just nothing to indicate that I had a career in professional sports gambling. But things changed, and it all started, I guess, a ride home from work, listening to the outcome of golf tournament, the match play championships, and they announced all these underdogs had won. The underdogs went like 21-11 the opening day. And I said to myself, if I could only find betting lines for this, I could have nailed this, because I knew that the golfers, you may have a 1 seed versus a 64 seed in this particular tournament, but their ability, it's nothing like college basketball. Their ability is so close that anyone can beat anyone else with regularity on the PGA Tour. So I searched that night for lines. And I found them. I was amazed, because there had been a lot of radio advertisements, and it was kind of puzzling at the time. You can actually bet on sporting events online. It was just incredible at the time. So I did find them. I found hundreds of sites, much to my amazement, and sent in a deposit that night and was off to the races.
So looking back now, based on what you know, that moment, when you're in the car and you were thinking about sports betting, do you think you were, predisposed to be able to be successful at it? Or did you start from ground zero looking back now? Or tell me about, upon reflection, where you think or how likely it was for you to be successful based on where you were at from a starting point?
It's the one advantage I have, or the gift I have, that I think most professional gamblers, is the ability to work well with numbers, to love working with them. And that's kind of innate. There was no training involved. I've just always had a knack for working with numbers, working well with numbers. And I think that's the biggest advantage. And that got me going, where I can just figure out, without the help of modeling or anything like that, I can figure out probabilities much better than the average folk can. So I think that's the biggest advantage I have, and kind of ran with that once I started getting into it, and was able to find plus EV opportunities, especially in those early days in the late 90s, when the industry is clearly not as evolved as it is now, where it's much more difficult to get your foot in the door now and to find those advantages.
So the whole, premise of being a professional gambler usually involves some sort of secrecy or keeping your edges to yourself. And obviously, as soon as they get out into the marketplace, then they'll diminish. So writing a book isn't always high on the list or number one on the list. Tell me about, I think I called it 2020 Sports Betting before. I think it's Sports Betting 2020. But tell us about the book, the intent behind it. Was it a Was it an outlet for you, or was it something that helps you in your professional betting, or what was the reason behind it?
It goes way back, even before my career in sports betting. I actually wrote a humor book in the late '90s. This is while I was working in insurance, and believe it or not, I was able to find a publisher. I allow me to shamelessly promote it because it's still seeing the light of day on Amazon. It's called Wilbur Winkle Has a Complaint, and that's surprising to a lot of people because professional gamblers, for the most part, aren't known for their quick wit. They're more, kind of shifty, socially awkward kind of guys. But I wrote that. It was a great experience. I had a lot of fun with it. I did a lot of radio and TV and actually even appeared on the O'Reilly Factor in its very early days, where I took the train up to New York and appeared on that show. So it was a lot of fun. And after 10 years or so of sports betting, I figured, man, that was fun. Let's try to do it again. I have an interesting topic, I think. And so I got going on it. It was over the span of years. It's not like I holed away in my basement and cranked out the sports betting book. I just, at slow times, I would knock out a few pages here and there. And over several years, and eventually I did find a publisher. That took quite a while too. Uh, as far as does it help me internally, it was more just a labor of love. I enjoy writing, and I enjoy talking about or writing about sports betting.
So the one thing you'll find everywhere is people say, "Here's what I like," or "Here's what I think you should bet. Go and bet it," or "Here are my power ratings or power rankings. Go and convert those into probabilities or whatever it might be, and make decisions with your betting that way." I think the one thing that is missing a little bit, and maybe it's not necessarily something that people want to always do because it's far more intensive in terms of time and digging into the details some more and learning about how to fish versus sort of giving someone the fish. So from your point of view, were you going to be focusing on sort of giving people information in that way so that they could go and use it for the longer term, as opposed to sort of short-term things that inevitably will dry up or will be sort of instant gratification or loss?
I believe, for the most part, I'm trying to instruct the reader on how to fish rather than giving them the fish. Uh, but I ran into problems. Like I figured at some point I got to throw some red meat out to the reader so they can specifically see exactly what I'm doing. I don't share all of my the things that I do, but there is some helpful things specifically on proposition wagering and golf wagering where I get really down and dirty and I show exactly what I'm doing. But for the most part, it's more of it's think like a pro. This is how I'm thinking. This is how I make money without specifically describing each and every method that I'm using. But I am very, very specific at times as far as how I'm doing it.
Can you take us back to the insurance industry days and how you transitioned from that into professional gambling and professional betting? Because I think, many people sit in those office jobs or have those gigs where they are in an industry that isn't gambling and might want to switch over at some point. So what was your story when it came to that?
Okay, so 34 years old, making decent money. I went to college in Maryland and eventually got into the insurance industry, making, getting by, maybe, as far as a bankroll goes, I mean, virtually non-existent. I mean, I didn't have much money at all, maybe a few $1,000s tucked away at the bank, but you tend to spend what you make. So living a very normal, mundane existence in Tampa, Florida. And once I discovered, I quickly discovered that the books, when I looked around, were making some mistakes. And I took advantage of those mistakes. And I told myself, as soon as I get a year's salary, I'm going to leave my job and focus totally on sports betting. And my first bet was placed in late February of '99. after that car ride home, won the match play championship in golf. And by June 8th, or July 8th, I left the job. So it took me approximately 4 months to get that year's salary banked away. And it's been my sole income ever since. It's been, 22 years now. Amazing. So amazing how time flies. So that's pretty much how I got going and left the job. I will say it's much more difficult. They were freewheeling days. The sports books were popping up overnight. They were, much easier to beat than they are today. It's much more of a challenge. I think it can be done. I continue to be profitable. And I think other people that have that wish or dream, it can be accomplished, but it is difficult.
So tell us about those early days, because many people listening in their 20s and 30s probably have no idea what that time was like, and obviously experiencing what it is today, and how easy certain aspects of things can be compared to back then. Tell us about the first couple of years and what your process was like, what you were doing, what you were focusing on, some of the things that might be unbelievable to someone in their 20s today.
Okay. Specifically, what really got me going was one play. And books were copycatted back then, as they still do. You see lines one place, and they'll copy them, and they'll post them up another place as well. So the wager that I really got jump started and was able to grow my bankroll tremendously in just a month or two was, let's say, Tiger Woods to win a golf tournament. He'll be listed, let's say, 8-1. Well, they listed 30 golfers, and at the bottom, they'll have the field listed at 4-1. So you're betting that one of those top 30 golfers is not going to win at 4-1 odds. But then they had a second column, and you're familiar with horse racing for sure. They had a place column where you can, by reducing the 8-1 by 25% or by 75%, you could get Tiger Woods to place at 2-1. But they also had that available for the field. So you reduce the 4-1 field odds, that becomes even money. Now, I ran the numbers and figured, man, I'm betting that anyone outside the top 30 has to place in that top 4, which I concluded it was about a 95% chance of winning. And it was even money. So a tremendous, tremendous advantage. So I played it in that book where I discovered it, and I continued nosing around and found that it was available in 3, 4, 5 books even. So I spent those first couple weeks going to Western Union. That's the way we did it back then. We physically showed up at Western Union offices and sent money to these Caribbean sports books. And when you're getting even money on a bet that wins 95% of the time, you can imagine your rise is going to be quite dramatic. So that's initially how I did it. But I found all kind of crazy advantages. They would keep golf matchups on the board even after the match had started. So there was just all kind of big advantages that just are not available now. So that's pretty much how I got my start in those first couple months.
Did those advantages stick around for an entire golf season, or was it longer than that back then, just given the nature of information flow, or is it similar to today where some of the things can dry up relatively quickly?
These plays, I was undefeated on that field bet. I took it, I think, 7 or 8 times, and then they cut it down to 1-2 odds, and I still kept playing it. I would play at 1-5, 1 to whatever, and eventually they took it away. I think the writing finally appeared on the wall, and it disappeared. But sure enjoyed it while it lasted, that's for sure.
Back then, what were you using as an aid? Were you, was it spreadsheet type stuff? Were there other tools you were using? Were you on, forums talking with other people? What did you have in your arsenal to try and beat the books back then?
Back then, it was just using I didn't have much, and I didn't learn how to use Excel probably for the first 2 or 3 years. But the lines were so off then, I just used handicapping just without much aids at all. For this field bet, I just looked back at the PGA Tour, the winners, and just looked at who was in the top four every week. And basically, if they weren't all big time players, you're going to win that bet. So that's how I came up with the 95% advantage. So there was very little with regard to modeling, with regard to Excel, figuring out odds and percentages that I rely on much more in this day and age.
So I'm guessing in the beginning, you're from Maryland, so I'm guessing what do you follow? What are your teams, the Ravens, or who do you normally follow?
Oh, I'm Ravens. Yeah, typical Baltimore teams:
Yeah.
Ravens, Orioles. That's who I grew up rooting for. Die-hard Orioles fan, and
So you
but
must have
mostly,
wanted to
yeah.
bet those teams, and you want to go straight to the NFL and bet the sides and stuff like that. Is that what you did? And did you spend some time in those bigger markets, or were you able to stay disciplined and focus on those crazy advantages you could find in golf and some of those other places?
Yeah, mostly my entire career is spent on finding those advantages on proposition wagers, uh, which the field bet was. Pretty much it's a proposition. Uh, I have never been, it seems 99% of the discussions are on the straight wagers. If you listen to sports gambling radio, on the totals and that stuff. I mean, who can beat those lines? I mean, it's a very, very rare breed. The public, they're not going to win on the NFL over the course of a couple of years. May they have a lucky year and win one year, sure, but over time, you're not going to be able to beat the markets. Very, very few can. So I'm totally focused on the markets I can beat in the sports that I can win at, specifically golf. As far as NFL football, I'm not playing sides and totals, but I am taking a look at each NFL game. There must be 100 props, every game posted. So that's, you have 1,000 props to look at on Sundays. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm wagering on even today.
How have those props developed? Because, like you said, there's thousands now. Are there still, a dozen that are mispriced every Sunday compared to maybe years ago where there might have been a total of 50, but you might have found a handful that were mispriced as well. What's the dynamic been like when it comes to props over the years?
Okay, back in the day, I could go down. There was a book, sportsbook.com, and they would put up for a Saturday, they would put up 150 college football props, and I would go right down the menu and play the under in every single one of them without even researching, and would win week in and week out. I don't think I ever lost. That's how mispriced the props are. Today's market's much more difficult. If I'm looking at 100 NFL props on Sunday, I might find three or four out of those 100 that I'll play, and those edges often aren't real big. But if you can get 500 down on a prop, three or four per game, you got 50 props, 500. That's $25,000 in play. So even though the opportunities are not nearly as much as those early days, I think they're still there. And I'm still busy on Sunday. I'm making plays and I'm coming out ahead. So the opportunities are there, just much more difficult to uncover.
And what about the Super Bowl? Because that's known as a bit of a bonanza when it comes to props. Has that been an area you've really focused heavily on over the years, or is that getting better and better as well? Because I know you would always hear people talking about some of the, you know, bigger props that just, I remember the one about, will there be a safety? The no price was huge, and a lot of people would take that every year, or some of these types of things that would always get discussed. But, now there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, sheets and sheets of betting props on a typical Super Bowl. Is that an area that you've spent a lot of time on over the years?
It definitely is. I'm in Vegas. I make probably a half dozen trips to Vegas every year, and for the Super Bowl props, those are 5 or 6 days when they come out that I'm definitely in town and working them. The prices are still, I mean, it's very challenging. You have to, you're playing against the other professionals as well. They're scurrying about around town, and it's pretty much whoever gets to them first is going to find all the value. There's so many people. I would say there's probably, I don't know, 25, 50 professional players playing those props that the value is going to be gone like 30 minutes after they're issued, because these players know what props are coming on the board. They know, they calculate what the prices should be, and they're not going to miss on many of them. So if you're not there right at the release, you're not going to find a lot of value. But that is a part of my arsenal. I'm there every year. The safety bet you mentioned, it's still, there's value. That's probably the best wager in the house. I mean, you can get minus 800, minus 900, any place pretty much. And the odds actually should be about minus 1500. So you're getting a lot of value there. But who wants to go to Vegas and put all that money and sweat the Super Bowl? I mean, it's just totally no fun. When have you ever seen guys celebrating the fact that there wasn't a safety? It just doesn't happen, at least in my world. So that's part of the betting NFL props is the wagers you make are not fun. The public wants to bet on Tom Brady to throw over 300 yards. They want him to throw over 2 touchdowns. They want to bet on Gronk to score a TD, where the lines are going to reflect that. So the value that you find are things that are not fun. You're hoping things don't happen. You're hoping for a game filled with 3 yards and a cloud of dust. I mean, that's really what you're hoping for. So it's not fun at all. In fact, on Sunday mornings or Sunday afternoons, watching the Red Zone, I told you maybe 3 or 4 plays per game. That adds up. I have a lot of action. When you're sitting down watching the Red Zone, it's just excruciating because they want to show stuff that is happening. So everything they show is basically not good for you. So it's really tough to do this. It's not fun, but you have to look at the bottom line. I guess you couldn't watch, but I guess I enjoyed the pain in a way. Who knows? But yeah, it's a grind.
Well, I remember there was a period there. I think Peyton Manning on that first play where there was a safety. It might have been against the Seahawks, and then it might have been a bit earlier. I think might have been the Ravens against the 49ers. The last play of the game was a safety where they were trying to run some time off the clock, and the punter ran the ball back into the end zone. So there's been some tough years for some of those bets. I guess an extension to that, you talked before about, you can almost bet blindly on the unders at a certain point in time, and betting on things not to happen, always taking the no at some bigger prices and stuff like that sometimes, and unders. It seems like that's the way most are going to be targeting it. And even though there is those examples of the safeties happening and things like that, there's going to be I think it was the Rams-Patriots Super Bowl where I think only Sony Michel scored a touchdown, a couple of field goals, and very low scoring as well. So I'm guessing even though there are some of those safety examples, over the time, you're going to have some more success if you're betting on things not to happen, you're on the unders, and you have big collects in some of those situations.
Yeah, you're definitely correct. Over time, you're always going to be better, at least how the markets stand now. And I think it comes down to human nature. You're always, if you have time not to research at all, you're always better on the under and the no bets, because it's just human nature. People want to bet on things to happen. They want excitement. They want to celebrate the wins. The safeties, I believe it was 3 straight years, like you stated. So really, they were some tough years because you're losing. Most professional bettors have some exposure on the no safety because it's such a strong play, but I don't think they make their exposure big enough that it's going to send them to the canvas if it loses. There's we always have a little bit on it, but not a whole lot, because we try to find value in other places.
Yeah. So this style of betting, how flexible have you been over the years? Because to tell someone, like you said, it's not always that sexy. It's a grind, using this sort of terminology. How easy is it to stick to this approach over the long term? Because I'm guessing many who have, let's say, 5 years of sustained success doing this type of thing will want to then go and attack NFL sides or totals, or they'll want to go and attack, NBA or things like that. Have you been able to dabble in other things, or have you been pretty disciplined to stick to what works for you and have that evolve over the years? Obviously, things change and markets morph and get a bit better and more efficient, but then more options and availability pop up with more props and things like that. Tell me about that and how you've thought about it over the years.
Yes, I'm very disciplined with what I do, but there are opportunities, and some of these I don't go over in the book. There are occasions where I'll bet 10, 15,000 on an NFL side or total. Those are rare events, but when the stars align perfectly, at least as I see they should align or are aligned, I will make that big wager. So it's not all grinding out, but I would say 90% of my profits come from this grinding of the profits. It's more. It's not a lot of fun, as I keep mentioning, but it's a job, and I enjoy it because I enjoy working with numbers. I think the fun part is finding the value rather than watching the game itself. I get the adrenaline rush of figuring out mentally, intellectually, that this is a strong play and here's why it is, and to make the wager. That's my fun. Of course, the events itself are fun to watch as well, but it's all about finding the value. That's the real fun in this.
What information do you intake that's valuable for you? Is it only market information? So, prices of these props, real odds that are out there, maybe different sports books, or there are other sources of information that can help you? Or even in that, NFL example, when you might bet aside for a decent chunk of change, are you, finding information from different sources, or how is the, I guess, the tools and stuff out there that you might use?
Yeah, I purchase most of the data that I use from various outlets. Football Armchair Analytics. They chronicle every single play, and the NFL is included on their spreadsheet. It's just massive, and I get that data, and I look for certain things, and that's how I that's how I price a lot of the props. So it's I don't all the data that I buy, it costs me maybe $1,000 a year. And the big bulk of that is the NFL stuff. That's about 800, I believe. So that's where I'm getting the information, and that's where I'm working the numbers in Excel and trying to find value.
I want to focus on golf for a moment. Let's just take this, upcoming season, let's say. How do you plan for it? What prep work do you do? Do you have things in mind that you want to look for throughout the coming, golf season, and you'll attack those, or does it evolve throughout a season and you need to cut it up into smaller chunks, for example, or are you honing in on individual players like, Morikawa, for example, over the last sort of 12 or 18 months might be a guy you were following through, that type of thing? Or tell me about some sort of strategy items that you might use or some listeners might be interested in hearing about.
Okay. Early on, I was handicapping golf and finding a lot of value because the lines weren't up to snuff. In today's world, things have changed dramatically. There are golfing modelers that are really astute at getting the lines right. The value is no longer there. I spent last week on the Players Championship. I said, I'm going to go the old-fashioned route. I'm going to handicap these 100 matchups because I know this course and I know who should excel. I'm going to look at course form. I'm going to look at current form. I'm going to look at driving accuracy. I'm going to handicap these matchups. And I started doing it. I got about a third of the way through and concluded I'm not finding value anywhere. It's because of these modelers. And you had one on the show, Rufus Peabody. I think he's one of the most well-known ones. These guys are that good. So what I can do is just not going to compete with those. Could I partner with a model and try to come up with my own? I mean, is that realistic that I'm going to be better than those guys? And there's more than one guy doing it. There's Data Golf that are doing it as well. So I golf handicapping the way I used to do it, it's just not happening now. I'll still do it at Augusta because I just know the Masters, I believe, so well that I think I can squeak out some value there. So I didn't make it through the 100 matchups, as I said. I saw the writing on the wall. These guys are just too good. But that's not to say I don't have action this week, and I have a lot of action. And I had a huge, gigantic play, despite what these modelers are doing, because Wednesday, as I was handicapping these matchups, I have the Golf Channel on, and sure enough, Justin Rose is being interviewed, and he states that he hasn't swung a club in a week. He withdrew the weekend before at Bay Hill. That is incredible information to have. So immediately I pulled up the Justin Rose lines, and you got to have some background. You got to be able to handicap somewhat. And I concluded that these lines are set with 100% healthy Justin Rose. Justin Rose is not 100% healthy. He's got a bad back, and he even said in the interview, I'm going to be a game time decision. So I immediately, and golf wagering, you'll be shocked at how much you can wager now. It's really, really taking off. And I recall during the football season, I could get on a Sunday morning, I could bet $10,000 on a daily golf match. And meanwhile, the NFL playoff games, the totals were 5K. I mean, figure that out. It's just really, so I unloaded against Justin Rose. Unfortunately, it did not work out. He withdrew a couple hours before, so it's no action. But there's a chance that he would have made it a go, gave it a go, and he's going to be firing not on all cylinders. There was a lot of value when I made those plays. I'm convinced of that. It just didn't work out on this particular occasion. But those are the things I'm going after. The things that aren't factored into the modelers' spreadsheets and what they're coming up with, because how do you model a Justin Rose saying he's a game time decision? The same thing happened with Chris Wood a couple years ago that I chronicled in the book in the British Open. He's pretty much said the same thing on the eve of the tournament. I think he said he was even in tears with pain. He did give it a go. I unloaded against him before the tournament started, just as I did against Justin Rose. And in this particular occasion, he withdrew after 12 holes. And in golf, if you WD, if you're on the other side, you're a winner. It's not like tennis where it has to go to the full length. Golf is a different animal. So those are the things that I'm looking at, the things that modelers are not picking up. One more thing I'll touch on briefly. A guy named, I'm following the golfers on golf Twitter now, and a guy named Brandon Stone, I think 2 weeks ago, got into a tournament. He found out on a Tuesday, and he was in Dubai, I believe, and on his social media account, he chronicled what he was going to need to do to make his tee time on Thursday. To me, that was a green light. I mean, you can't travel halfway around the world, not see the course, and expect to be sharp. His lines as well, and the handicapping that I did, they reflected a normal Brendan Stone, who is 100%, who is well rested. So I unloaded on that one as well. Had a little bit of success. He beat me on Thursday, but I came back and beat him Friday and the rest of the weekend. So those are the things that I'm going after that the modelers are not catching.
Do you prefer betting into markets with Tiger Woods? Because obviously a large chunk of your betting career has probably included Tiger at the top of a lot of those outright markets, and I know you're probably focusing on other things as well. But nowadays with, a good DJ, Brooks, there's a lot of guys coming through now, Rory, of course, and John Rahm, you can go down the list. There's a few now who are right up there. has it been better to see those kind of guys come through and different types of betting markets with some of those, fields where it's 10-1 the field at least, and then obviously those Tiger days you're getting even as crazy as 3-1 and 4-1 and some of these prices, which in a golf tournament you'd think is impossible, but obviously, that was the power of Tiger in those betting events.
Yeah, Tiger has cost me so much money over the years because when leading majors, I would go in on Saturday night and say he just can't. Things go wrong. Guys come from behind to catch him. And I would play so many guys that, 15, 20 to 1 to overtake them, and they never did. I thought Tiger's odds, it just always seemed like they were inflated, like you said, 3 or 4 to 1, and the matchups the same way. And he just totally, totally has crushed me. But he's been great for the game. He's been great for betting. He's been great for fantasy sports because who knows where we'd be if there wasn't Tiger Woods. So for that reason, I'm grateful that he's put the game where he has, which is, like I said, with those betting lines on nothing matchups on Sunday, you can get more down on an NFL game. It's just unbelievable. So as far as the field plays, outright markets, I basically will look at those on Saturday nights. I think before the tournament starts, the lines are so good that I'm not real active on those markets before pre-tourney.
And what about the different types? Obviously, there's match play, there's stroke play, there's the Ryder Cups and all these different things going on throughout the year. Is that something else that you've found advantages in, or is it a game of golf is a game of golf and it doesn't really matter, and at the end of the day, you'll just attack it with the different variables that exist, and that's just the way it'll be?
I'm far more active on the four majors and the players last week. They call that the fifth major because they do have more props, especially with the players last week with the guys. Will they make an ace? Things like that. Will they put a ball in the water on 17, the island green? I think I'm much more adept at finding value in those kind of peculiar, kind of strange lines. I also gravitate towards making cuts. Will guys make cuts? Will they miss cuts? Margin of victory. Things that increasingly, I'm afraid, the modelers are getting more involved with those wagers as well because I can see the line sharpening up. But those are still on my radar. I still make the trips to Vegas 4 times a year. Those are 4 of my trips with the golf wagers because I still feel confident in some of those plays. You see a lot more or less than just the basic run-of-the-mill matchups when the golf majors are occurring. Specifically the Masters, that's my favorite event of the year. Played on the same course, so I feel really comfortable in finding value on those lines.
So for those listening that haven't yet picked up a copy of the book, and they should definitely do so, what's one of the themes that you would most want to harp on when it comes to either a aspirational gambler who's looking to, improve and increase their betting acumen that comes from, we talked before about thinking like a pro. Is there anything that stands out from writing the book and going through that process that you would impart to those people looking to improve?
Yeah, I think the book is focused towards recreational gamblers. If you're the type of gambler that I was and just wants to play a few games in fall on the weekends, that's fine. But and have fun. I mean, gambling is fun, and for 90% of the people doing it, 99% are recreational. I would say there's very few professional gamblers out there. But I think I can, with the methods that I use, I can look and hopefully direct people to broaden your horizons a little bit and start. If you want to focus on making money or at least not losing as much, there's much in my book that I think that can help you, specifically on going after those markets that perhaps they're not attacking now. And as I said earlier, 99% of us are just playing those sides and totals and parlays, specifically parlays. That's just not where it's at. They're a lot of fun. Have fun with them. But if you're really interested in financially and upping your game, I think you would find my book useful, informative, and perhaps get you in the right direction. And basically, you can see what you got. I talk a lot in the book evaluating what you need to do to see if this could be something where you could use as a part-time job. Do you have a knack for it? And I provide some tests that you can do on your own to see, do I have the right stuff? Can I do this? So you'll find that in the book as well. So definitely recreational gamblers who are interested in upping their game, I think will find my book interesting.
And one final area I wanted to get your thoughts on was just the general trajectory of sports betting as it applies to someone with your style and your techniques and your approach, because plenty of people will say how hard it is to get on these days and limited accounts and being kicked out of sports books and a lot of those types of things if you are winning. However, I also hear you talk about thousands of different props that are available. Golf, especially, limits are going up, and availability of betting options there is seemingly positive. Betting markets are becoming more globalized, which can have some positive impacts. And you talked about sort of the copycat effect on some of the lines and prices. If that's the case, there might be some better options out there available. So I don't know that everything necessarily has to be negative, but I'd love your viewpoint on, what the next handful of years might hold for someone like yourself in this space. Or do you anticipate it getting easier, or a little bit harder, or a bit of both? Or what's the next steps look like for you?
I'm optimistic that I just heard that someone say in New Jersey there's like 19 different outs. And I just think that with variety, and it's going to continue to grow. We don't have it. I live in California. We don't have it here yet, but supposedly 2022, it's looking good. I think it's going to be, I'm hoping for some golden years ahead. I know some books are frustrating, specifically to professional players. They can't get action down, but there's going to be books that aren't so sharp. And the more books you have and the more growth you have, it's going to be a real thinning of the ranks. And, you gotta have some smarts to run a sports book. And I think the higher the growth, you're going to see some things that I saw earlier in my career where it seems like they're asleep at the wheel. They're going to be more exposed. You're going to find more opportunities. So that's my hope. That's my outlook. I haven't, as far as getting cut off accounts, it is necessary for me to partner with others. It's just not me. I have been cut off in online and in Vegas. I've been cut off in Vegas, but I have betting partners, and together we're able to continue on and to make wagers that we want to. I'm a little less under the radar as far as I'm not making I think a lot of the Steam players are the ones who run into the most problems, where books can easily recognize that these guys are picking off our stale numbers, and they don't want that kind of action. So those players, it's going to continue to be difficult for them. I think of what I'm doing, it's a little easier to fly under the radar, but they notice prop players pretty quickly as well. So it is necessary to have partners in what I do.
So the book's available on Amazon, is that right?
Yes, it is available on Amazon. Huntington Press, Anthony Curtis is the publisher. If you go to his website, I think you can get it a little cheaper if you're going for the book form. Yep. I think he has a special 20/20 or 2020 is the price there, where Amazon and other booksellers is going to be a couple dollars more.
Well, I saw a very kind review from Elihu Fustel, who's known in this space. I think he called it uncommonly good sports betting book. So if that's anything to go by for those that are still not yet convinced, it's definitely worth a read. It's worth picking up, and there's not too many books out there these days that'll help you, make that step up if you're looking to, move from the lower to middle tier and get better at sports betting. So I would encourage plenty of people who are in that, in that range to go out and get a copy and pester you with emails and questions and learn from you as well, because I think that's one thing that, finding people that have done it in the past and continuing to do it is not that easy. And the book will certainly shed some light on that for them.
So thank you. I was thrilled to get Elihu Fustel's review of that, because he's reviewed more books than anyone. He knows more about the industry than anyone, and he wrote Conquering Risks. So he was the first guy to review it. I sent him a copy, and I didn't hear from him for a week, and I was on pins and needles thinking, man, does he just not like it or what? And just such a relief because he wrote a very favorable review. And he said, if you follow my methodology, you're actually in a good position to make money, to have an advantage. So, yeah, that was thrilled to get that, to say the least.
Well, and I think just the methodology is very apt for many because you can, focus on some of these smaller markets, the prop betting stuff, as opposed to an alternative method which people sort of read and hear about, and building your own whiz-bang model to try and beat a major market. It's just obviously more difficult. So I think it's certainly a valuable starting point, if nothing else, for many people. And if they want to expand into that other stuff, they can absolutely do that. And there's, books on those types of things as well. But it's been fun chatting. I appreciate your time. It's not often you pick up a good sports betting book these days. There's plenty of bad ones out there. So it's very nice to be able to steal some of your time and hear about your story and then obviously the book.
Well, thank you very much, Jake. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Long-time listener of the show, and appreciate it. It's quite a thrill to finally to be on here as a guest. So thank you.